So thanks everybody for being here. We have a great presentation coming up by Maura Chestnutt, who is the VP of Strategic Initiatives for Catalyst Community Development Society. And without further ado, Maura, I'll pass it over to you. And you just let me know when you need me to advance slides.
Thanks, Michelle. So I work with Catalyst Community Development Society. We are a not-for-profit developer owner-operator founded in October 2013. What you're looking at right now is the artist's rendering for our project in Victoria, the Madrona. It's located at Dockside Green, which was a lead for neighborhood development community. And this was the affordable housing component of that original neighborhood design. And next slide, please. I just wanted to share with you our vision and our mission. So our vision is to create vibrant, inspiring, and affordable spaces for living and working. I think it's important sometimes when you're building below market housing or social housing, it's easy to lose sight of inspiring words and an aspirational vision for your project that goes beyond the utilitarian. And so keeping in mind that we want to create vibrant, inspiring, and affordable spaces, to me, it makes the projects that we're building better. We partner generally with groups that have land to unlock the value in their real estate and move things forward for both parties. Next slide, please. So first I wanted to talk a little bit about our Community Connections program. The components of the Community Connections program themselves are not really far off of what most groups are doing. We host 4 events a year typically. We participate in the Hey Neighbour collective, and our research partner is Simon Fraser University. They conduct regular surveys of our tenants, and we share that research with others, and it is collected and shared with other members of the Hey Neighbour collective. Another component of our program is an online platform, sort of a mini Facebook for people in each of our buildings. I've excerpted from some of the stories that people have told, where it shows the ways in which people are using the online platform. So we're seeing that it can be used to resolve issues. It can be used just to make connections with other people. So maybe you want to connect with somebody to share childcare, or to create a dog walking group or a bike workshop. And we're finding that is helping, especially during COVID. It really gave us a great way to connect with our tenants in a safe way, and it helped us to maintain relationships during COVID, even when I wasn't able to visit in person. The next component of our program is probably the most innovative, and that's our town hall meetings. Our town hall meetings came out of our first gathering with tenants at Madrona, and it was clear that we needed to create a space where our tenants could speak freely about concerns, and I could ask questions. And so we talk about things that sometimes are uncomfortable, like income testing. I listen to their observations around our building design, and then feed that back to our other staff at Catalyst. And that's really been where the relationships have really seeded themselves and become stronger. And our tenants know that I will respond to them, and that I am listening, and that it is a safe space to talk about anything that's a concern. The last piece of the Community Connections program, which I think is really what makes it different and most successful, is that we're willing and able to be vulnerable with our tenants. The notion of the town halls was really difficult for our property managers. We have third-party property managers um, to get on board with. There was a lot of fear around opening the door to tenant input. There was a lot of advice not to go there because you never know what's going to happen, or they're going to become too demanding, or you're going to get yourself into trouble, and that's really not proven to be the case. We have amazing people living in our buildings, and they have a lot of really great contributions to make to our projects. And I've had nothing but good experiences as a result of the town hall, and I really feel like it's made us a much, much better landlord and property owner. And so I would highly recommend giving it a try. Um, and that vulnerability piece is really what makes the difference. Is if you as a landlord can allow yourself to not be kind of if you can allow yourself to be vulnerable, then you can truly be in relationship with your tenants. And so I would really encourage that. I also wanted to point out on this slide we have three examples of ways in which we have mitigated the absence of amenity spaces at Madrona. So there's no amenity room at Madrona. We've had to get a little bit creative. I have used the meeting room for an optical store across the bridge. So we all walk across the bridge and go to the meeting room at the Ollie Optical. And then here on the left, you can see we did pumpkin carving in the parkade, which is 6 stalls for 49 homes. In the center, you can see a gathering place that's evolved during COVID at the top of our stairs on an easement between our buildings and a group of condominiums. And you can also see on the top right-hand corner, we've blocked off the street in front of our studio homes, brought in tents and some tables, and that's where we host barbecues, and we've had connect and prepare workshops there as well. So we've had to get really creative in terms of finding a space to meet all together, but it's definitely worked out. Next slide, please. Okay, this is a side by side of the two sides of Madrona. So it's two buildings. The upper side is on the left, and you can see that there's a nice walkway in front of these homes. It's facing a landscaped area. There's dividers between the patios. There's patio and outdoor space. There's greenery. And on the right hand side, you can see the lower half of the building, which is our studio units. There is no green space here, no shared space for meeting, and they're facing a parking lot. And you can also see the blinds are closed in these windows almost all the time because of privacy concerns. So it's been quite a dramatic difference. The tenants in the studio units we have higher turnover, we have less participation in activities, and people report knowing fewer of their neighbors on the right hand side. On the upper side, we have almost no turnover, and we've seen really tight communities start to form there, and children are usually outside playing and running between the different units. So on the left it's 1, 2, 3, and 4 bedrooms, and on the right on the bottom there it's just studios. Next slide, please. This is showing just the close-up of the two front entryways, which I think is really it's very clear that there's a difference. On the left, we've got these little quads forming. These 4 apartments are interacting with each other in a really natural way on a pretty constant basis. And so we're starting to see that these relationships are very strong between the 4 units, and people are choosing to claim the space and make it their own. On the right-hand side, you can see the bamboo has started to grow up, and that has been a request from the tenants because it does improve their privacy, but it's not as welcoming a front porch. And there's not a lot of space. You can't fit a chair really outside. And we're finding that people are they're not really wanting to engage because there is no real space between the units. Next slide, please. This one, thank you, Michelle, for the graphic. So this is a bike room at Madrona, and this has been probably the #1 discussion topic over the last 4 years is bike storage. So in the bike room, we have storage, I think, for 47 bikes. And then we have a shed as well that was supposed to be holding additional bikes, but it has no back on it, and it was getting broken into a lot, so that's really been abandoned. The bike storage room has no space for bike trailers. It has no space for bike seats on the back of bikes, and we're finding our older tenants are really struggling with getting their bikes up on the wall. And so it's a very active cycling community, and many of our tenants will have more than one bike. It's almost car free at this development, and the bike storage is really inadequate. So 49 units, and we've got family units. So many of those families have 3, 4, 5 bikes, and there's nowhere to store them. There's also no residential storage at this project. So the bike room is full all the time, and then people are having to find other ways to store their bikes in their homes, which are often smaller than you might see in market. And that might not seem like it's really tied to social connectedness, but if you don't have the ability to live comfortably and to see your family grow over time and have a space that can adapt and accommodate your needs over time, then you're not really able to put down roots. And if you're not able to put down roots, you're not able to develop those relationships with your neighbors or to feel a sense of permanence in your home. So things like storage and sound insulation are super important to building those relationships between tenants. We're finding that one of our tenants actually reported that they were starting their family, and she said that the reason that they felt comfortable to start a family was because they had the stability of living at Madrona, and they knew they could put down roots. They had been renovated quite a lot. And that sense of being able to put down roots is really tightly connected to building design, and things like bike storage are a part of that. Next slide, please. I wanted to close with this. This is the interior of one of our tenants' home. You can see the space is, is small, but it is decorated and designed with care. The finishes are good. We always have vinyl plank flooring in our homes because our homes are always pet friendly. And so or the majority of our homes are pet friendly, and the vinyl plank flooring just really makes a huge difference in terms of design and accommodating family life and pets. The kitchen is open and inviting. There's a lot of natural light in most of our homes. It's a feature that our tenants have commented on, and it is thoughtful. And so for many people coming into below market housing, they are expecting to be living in something that is more utilitarian and with less of a design focus. And I like showing this because I think it is possible to have sustainability, affordability, and beauty all combined. I don't think it has to be that you can have one or two. I think you can have them all in an affordable housing development. And so that's where I'd like to leave
You
things.
so much, Maura. I really appreciate that. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing here so that we can see each other a bit better and so that I can tell if there are um, questions emerging. So I don't see any question. Let's see, I think we've got one question here. Wow, Moira, super impressive. I love the vision mission statements too. A question. Can you please provide a few more examples of some other design challenges that tenants has raised as issues that you have been able to address?
Hmm. Well, I think the lack of well, I did kind of touch on it, but the lack of the amenity room at Madrona, we originally addressed it by walking across the bridge, and I found an optical store that let us use their back room as a meeting place. So that's where we had our parties. And I think in terms of other design issues, the one thing that's really coming up right now from an operations perspective is we put in smaller stoves in some of our buildings and smaller refrigerators. Um, and the repairs for the sort of specialized appliances is incredibly difficult. For our project at Oak Ridge, it is that's the number one complaint there is the fridges are, I would say, micro fridges. They're the Blombergs with the wine rack in them. You can't fit a 2 liter jug of milk in it. You can't, and we have 24-inch stoves. You can't, it's always at Thanksgiving and Christmas. I start to hear, I can't fit a turkey in my oven. Um, People are finding that the lack of storage in the kitchen appliances is really problematic, and they're having to buy supplementary appliances. The other thing that people have brought forward, particularly with our building at Oak Ridge, it's a LEED Platinum building and it retains heat really, really well. We don't have air conditioning in the units, but generally during the heat wave, I would say they were 3 to 4 degrees above the temperature outside. So we've had to buy portable air conditioners. And I think that's probably a design aspect that we should be thinking about as we go forward and these heat waves become more the norm. Um, yeah, I'm sure I have lots more, but they're not
That's
coming to
great.
mind.
No, that's great, Maura. I appreciate, and I've always appreciated this in our community of practice, how honest you are about what you experience. You don't sugarcoat that you always get it perfect, right? And there's a lot of learnings, and you talk with your tenants about this. And I think that's the power of your town halls, is it creates an opportunity to hear constructive critique and feedback from tenants, as well as building positive things and events and whatnot with them. So we've got another question here from Jeanette asking if you can share more about the how. So specifically, this is more around programming. Are there policies or practices that empower staff to be more vulnerable with tenants and share decision making as it relates to the community? So
Mhm.
I know you are like the core person at Catalyst who does this, but I wonder if you might talk about the role of property managers and how unusual your setup is. Yeah.
I was going to just mention during COVID in particular, I realized that I have full autonomy granted to me by my organization to be kind. And so I would say the autonomy of that kindness it is, I know with 100% that if I am in a situation where I need to make a decision and it is the kind decision to make and a responsible decision, I don't need to go and check with anybody on that. It is, I know that my organization will support that. And I'm not saying I don't, I'm going rogue or anything, but just knowing in my core that that doing the kind thing and the right thing is authorized by my organization is huge. And property managers in market property management do not have that sense. And that is not granted to them by their organizations. And during COVID, one of our property managers um, reached out and he said, "Thank you. You're letting me be human during this." And that just like, it's heartbreaking to think about all of the tenants who are being managed by people who are um, not feeling that they have an opportunity to be human during a pandemic.
Yeah.
It just, yeah, kind of blew my mind. So it's
Yeah.
not so much a policy, and I'm not sure if I answered your question, Jeanette, but it is it is something that we talk about at the org at Catalyst, and it is something that is understood that being kind to our tenants is uh, is fully endorsed by the organization.
And I think just to clarify too, for people who don't know Catalyst model well, you are dealing with a different third-party property management company for every single building you have right now, because as an organization, you're new and you don't have the in-house property management built in yet. So Maura is dealing with a number of relationships with property management companies for whom this is not typical practice yet.
Yeah.
I'm going to move on to Laura's question. She asks, based on everything you've learned, what challenges do you think you'd have in trying to incorporate these learnings, I guess, into new projects or existing? So she's thinking specifically about financial trade-offs. For example, why you chose to go with more housing at Madrona rather than the communal room.
Mhm.
That's a
I think,
complicated question, but
yep. I think for Madrona, that was our first project. So, and the studio units were originally the parking stalls for the townhouses above. So they're micro units. They're like 250 square feet. Um, I think when we first started out with that first project, we underestimated the value of an amenity room, and I don't know that it was a bad call. It just it definitely increased our awareness of how much nicer it is to have a dedicated amenity space. And the challenge I'm finding, I think there's a real mindset to follow market or to be competitive, and so we we tend to build, and our architects, our interior designers, our builders tend to build to what market expectations are, um, rather than listening to the feedback from the people who are living there. And I think maybe in market or traditionally in rental housing, that feedback loop has been missing. But I think also there hasn't really been a focus on tenure for rental tenants. And so it only becomes important to ensure that long-term livability if you're committed to having people be able to age in place. And
mm,
so the biggest challenge then is just overcoming. Um, there's so many things that the decision is automatic, and people in the industry aren't questioning anymore because that's just, you always do that. And so it's almost like there's an opportunity for a reset or something. And the question I like to ask is, could your family live in this space? And Michelle likes my story of meeting with our general contractor, and we were talking about storage, and he said, this is built to code. And I said, well, do you have kids? And he said, yeah. And I said, could your kids fit all their soccer stuff and their bikes in this space? And he said, no. And then it was like, it became alive again for him because he reconnected with people living in the space. And another aspect of our community connections program I didn't talk about earlier is we have a welcome party or housewarming at the beginning of our projects where we invite the whole team. So the architects and municipal staff and our funders and the construction guys come as well. And then we also invite our tenants and our partners and our neighbors, and we celebrate that building going into occupancy together. And for many of the people that are working on the building, it's the first time they've met the people who are going to be living in the homes that they've created. And I think reestablishing those relationships between tenants and the people who are designing the spaces and the people at the municipality, um, I think that's where the change is really going to happen, is building those bridges and those conversations.
yeah. Um,
Sorry.
Richard Evans, I'm going to invite you to ask your question directly to Maura.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks. I've been thinking a lot about tenure lately, and in rental, it seems to me like it's a bit of an uphill battle, really, in terms of fostering connections. I live in a co-op in Falls Creek. That's where I'm coming from in terms of ownership and the relationship of that to connectedness. And I'm wondering if Catalyst has ever considered either like a shifting to a rent to own model within your developments, because there's the ability to create home, I think, is fundamentally connected to ownership and having skin in the game and the relationships between owners in a development. Can you comment on that, please?
We haven't discussed rent to own. We have started looking at something similar to a co-op where you have a stake in things. But I'm going to challenge you a little bit on one of the comments you made. I think in Canada, we do have a perception that you have a stronger relationship to your community and home if you are an owner as opposed to a renter. But that's not what is necessarily typical around the world or in other places. And for many of our tenants, it's a very conscious decision that they want to be a renter. They don't want to own. And so I'm really interested in ways that we can make rental housing feel like home while you have still have the benefits of being a renter and not having that skin in the game. But I think Catalyst is looking at ways of diversifying that model.
And Maura, you do talk a lot about, or we talk a lot about in the project that, um, again, challenging this notion of ownership being connected to belonging in a community, or connectedness with your neighbors. I think a lot of the time that's because in a lot of situations as a renter, you don't have the same kind of security of tenure. So even if you wanted to stay where you are, you often don't have that option, particularly if you're living in secondary market rental, someone's basement suite, or rented out home or something, or rented out condo for that matter. So less so if you're in purpose-built rental, but even there, the building can get sold, it can get knocked down and redeveloped. And if your municipality doesn't have strong, relocation policies, or if you don't have abundant affordable housing options that you can move to, you're often not punted just from your neighborhood, but perhaps your entire region.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's actually the essence is security of tenure, so that as a renter, you can stay in a place for a long time and establish those roots.
Mm-hmm.
But I do agree, we need more models like what you're talking about, rent to own, co-ops, situations where you do feel like you've got a bit more stake.
I did want to mention that for our tenants, we do have income testing for majority of our units, and that income testing is probably, I know from talking with tenants, that is the number one fear that people have, is that there is no space to do better. So if you get a pay, we had one fellow came to me and he had been homeless and this was his first home, and he got a raise at work, and he said, I don't think I'm supposed to tell you this, but I got a raise and I'll be over on the next income test. And he said, I think I'm going to go to my manager and say, can you pay me less money so I can keep my home, because I don't have enough money to live in market housing. So
We're going to get punted back to the main session.
yeah,
We could do a whole other half an hour on this issue alone, Maura.
I know. I'm
Thank you,
opening.
everybody. We'll see you
Bye.
back in
Thanks,
the main room in a
everybody.
few
Bye.
seconds. Thanks for all your
Bye.
great questions.